We actually put together a really good Wednesday show. Second hour, Stephanie Gray, who now I call Stephanie Gray Connors, since she got married, is going to do a pro-life open forum with us. And you know Stephanie is just among the best at that. So if you've got questions, and by the way, Stephanie loves to talk to people who are not pro-life. And so if you've got a sincere question or maybe even a complaint about us pro-lifers, you're welcome to call the second hour, 888-318-7884. The first hour, somebody that we should have on more often. I'm just going to say it. We should just have her on more often. I don't know why I have to end up saying that every time, but Rose Sweet is here. We're going to talk about divorce this hour with Rose Sweet. If you have questions about what the Catholic Church teaches about divorce, maybe you have questions that pertain to your own life or the life of a loved one regarding divorce, 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. If you don't know Rose Sweet, two things. Your life is poorer for it, and I'll tell you a little bit about her right now. She's a Catholic author, a fantastic Catholic speaker. The first time I saw her speak blew me away. She's a life coach. Among her books, she's got a whole bunch of books, but her most recent books are the Catholic Woman's Guide books from Tan Books, A Catholic Woman's Guide to Happiness, one to Romance, one to Relationships, and this year, I think not out yet, A Catholic Woman's Guide to Temperaments. Rose Sweet, thanks for being with us.
I love being on this show. I need to see you more often too, Cy.
I know.
I miss you.
Well, thanks. I'm super happy to have you here. I mean, it's not like the happiest thing we're going to talk about today. Sometimes we talk about different things with you, but you have devoted a good part of your life to help and healing for families who have suffered divorce.
Yes, I have, and it has been difficult, but it has been a blessing and a pleasure to bring God's love and healing and hope to people who've been hit by divorce.
If you have a question for Rose, 888-318-7884, the number 888-318-7884. Not without controversy, though, so I want to get some things kind of straight with you about what the Catholic Church teaches about divorce. Do you ever get the feeling like the Catholic Church almost teaches two separate things about divorce? It seems like that to me sometimes.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because it fits in with what I call the hot fudge Sunday theory.
Okay? Oh, my favorite theory, hot fudge Sunday theory.
It's an ancient doctrine. Okay,
yeah.
So let me ask you, is a hot fudge Sunday hot or cold?
Yes.
That was ridiculous, but it was right.
It is hot and cold.
Okay, so we have to remember that there are a lot of instances in life where two seemingly opposing truths can coexist, and they're both true, and yet to consider one without the other is to not have the fullness of the truth. So here's what the Church teaches. In short, that divorce, and this is out of the Catechism, it's a grave offense against the natural law. It claims to break the contract. It does injury to the covenant of salvation. It's immoral because it introduces disorder into the family and the society. It's a travesty. It's devastating, and it's huge. And that's all true.
So that's the cold side, or maybe that's the hot side. I don't know if that's the fudge or the ice cream.
Depending on where you are. But here's what the Church also teaches. If either of the spouses causes grave mental or physical danger to the other spouse or to the children, or otherwise renders the common life too difficult, that spouse gives the other a legitimate cause for leaving. Doesn't mean that the marriage bond is over, but it means you don't have to tolerate that. And the Church doesn't say check your brains at the door. She says, look, if it's that bad, get out, get safety, get help, and let us help you look at what happened.
Yeah.
If there's no grounds, if there's no reason that we can declare this marriage null and it's still valid, you have to live within that truth, because that's where you're going to find your ultimate freedom and happiness. And it's going to be tough, but we're going to help you. So there's the hot and cold. Yeah. Sadly, in our culture, when people are discussing this, we find one camp that speaks to our experience and our belief and understanding, and we stick with that, and we close ourselves off to the other side. And then we get hostile, and we start to, here we are, divorce each other, even in the conversation.
Right. We go do our own little divorce from people who sit in the pews with us because we disagree about these fundamental questions about marriage. I think there is a sense of almost panic about marriage, though. I don't know if panic is the right word, but well, either A, people have a completely lax view of marriage, which is unchristian, is incompatible with what Christ taught. But on the other hand, people who love marriage and want Christ's vision of marriage to be lived, there's just this sense of, oh my Lord, look at the hill we have to climb. We've made a real mess of our society.
And we have. And the problem is, in both sides, fear enters in. And this is where we have to bring our faith. We have to center our minds and hearts on Jesus Christ and how he dealt with these things. But the people who are trying to uphold marriage and stop this horrible onslaught of divorce mentality, they also are gripped by fear, because they can't allow themselves sometimes to think that maybe those people did have a legitimate right to divorce. No, you're being lazy, you're being selfish. No, you should get back together. This can't be happening. And again, fear can invade either side.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there's also the thing, however, about there's a distinction between, not to say that divorce is a good or is a casual thing, but it's different when we talk about divorce and the remarriage after divorce. These are two different categories. And I think it comes down to, well, I don't know. I see you took a deep breath. I'm going to just let you correct me, or go ahead, or whatever you're about to do.
No, you don't need. You do not need correcting. I'm not Missy. Don't worry about it. Everybody knows Missy is your wife, right?
Right.
Okay.
And she does correct me. Yes.
But you are absolutely right. It's a hill. I just lost my train of thought.
Well,
it's just so many things are going through my mind right now.
Well, it just seems to me that if you go back to Jesus himself, he talks about marriage, but he talks then about remarriage. They're not the same thing. Like the divorce and the divorce and remarriage. They're two separate things that he talks about.
Yes, but here's sadly, because of the fear that has infected our whole culture, in this dialogue, people are no longer sometimes even talking about remarriage. They're now looking at, you can't divorce. You should never divorce.
Yeah.
You don't have grounds for divorce. They're not even thinking about remarriage. They're now really attacking a lot of the poor people who entered marriage with goodwill and find themselves divorced or having to civilly divorce for a serious reason and undergoing a lot of shame and a lot of criticism. So I'm asking everybody in the conversation to come back to a place of peace and trust in the Lord. He moved in and to the woman caught in the act of adultery and said, "Who is here to condemn you?" And she said, "No one." And he said, "Well, then neither do I condemn you, but don't do that anymore."
Right.
And people hated him for that. They thought he was being too lax. They thought he was being too weak and pathetic and not listening to the Mosaic law, but he wasn't. He perfectly held the tension between this truth and that truth that seemed sometimes so opposed to each other. Right. We need grace and wisdom to be able to look at both of those and hold them with the same tension that he did.
I have to say, Rose, I think that we Catholics do shame each other about things. And like even to the point where sometimes I feel like the person who has a Catholic family with only one or two children, for example, then they're, and I know this is, I don't mean to be controversial, but no one has the right to shame anyone. That's a Catholic family. You don't know anything about those people, and your judgment of them and your shaming of them is wrong. And I think that's the case with divorce as well. We're pretty good at shaming each other within our own community.
Right, and whatever the topic is, that the real issue is fear. The people who think you should have 10 million kids and the people who think you should be able to choose to have just one. We don't know what's going on in their lives. Most of the time we're not privy to that. Even they're not even aware sometimes. But we're afraid. This is a human nature. We've made this decision. This is our truth. And then we look out there and we get afraid. Uh-oh, they must be wrong. Something's wrong with them because we're trying to protect ourselves. We are so afraid to be who we are and to be in line with God's word and God's love and allow other people the freedom to be different without being sinful and mean and horrible and terrible.
Rose Sweet, I'm sorry, Rose. I got to take this break, but yeah. Rose Sweet is our guest, and I will monopolize Rose. Rose is one of those guests that I will just talk to the whole hour if you don't talk to her. So 888-318-7884, the number. Personal questions, welcome. Questions of maybe a problem that you have intellectually with what the church teaches. I'm just not sure. I'm not clear. You need some clarity on divorce, annulments, all of that. 888-318-7884. And if you're not a Catholic, and you'd like some clarity on why the Catholic Church teaches what it teaches, Rose, the perfect person for that when it comes to marriage and divorce. 888-318-7884. I do have some of my own questions for you when we come back, Rose, but we'll also let callers get through to you. 888-31-TRUTH, right back with more Rose Sweet on Catholic Answers Live.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Hey, it's Wednesday, and that means a new episode of our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus, has dropped. You can check it out at CatholicAnswersFocus.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Catholic Answers Focus, the world's premier podcast on Catholic apologetics, now available every Wednesday at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
I was raised Catholic, but then went to the other side and tried to commit suicide a couple of times several years ago. My savior happened to be a Catholic priest here locally, and I wanted to say, though, surrounding myself with people like yourself and this radio station. This morning I felt kind of alone, and then I was like, oh yeah, EWTN. Oh, I love it.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Rose Sweet is our guest. We're talking about divorce, a sensitive topic, but one that it's not that hard to be clear on the Catholic teaching if one is willing to be clear on it. 888-318-7884, the number. If you have a question for Rose, 888-318-7884. We often hear it said like this: well, the church tolerates divorce. Are you okay with that language?
I am and I'm not. See, there's the duality there.
What are you, a Catholic?
Okay. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Both
and. Okay, in our culture, the word tolerate comes across sometimes like this. Well, I certainly wouldn't have done that, and I think you might be headed in the wrong direction, but I do see the church does say that, so yes, we do tolerate divorce. Okay, there's an arrogance and a pride and a shaming in that. There are many places, and this is out of the Catechism and canon law. And I read part of it. If the common life is too difficult or, there's a danger, you have a legitimate cause for leaving. There is cause for leaving. There, in the Catechism, 1649 at 2383, there are some situations where living together becomes impossible. And in such case, the church permits the physical separation. So we don't just tolerate isn't the only word. We have to be careful that we realize in other places in church teaching, it is allows, permits, and even in some cases, God forbid, get the heck out of there. That you almost have the church implies that you almost have a responsibility, a moral responsibility to leave the home temporarily for safety's sake. but the marriage bond still stands, and you must live in accord with that. And it's difficult, but we're here to help you.
But
Now, go ahead. Go ahead.
It just brings up the immediate question of discerning that, because like a good marriage gets to a point where often, in many cases, a good marriage, because marriage is long, it gets to a point where it feels intolerable to the spouses and to Missy in particular. No, I mean, but so how does one discern, is this the kind of thing that I suffer through? Because God, Jesus said, take up your cross each day and follow me. And right now my marriage is a cross, and it has been for the last 5 years, but maybe it won't be 5 years from now. And I need to carry that cross. How do I discern that, which is very reasonable and probably the more common thing, from no, there is something so gravely wrong that we need to physically separate?
Okay, just discernment. It's just like anything else. People get lazy and they get afraid that if they go get advice from a wise and holy person, from a coach, from a spiritual director, from a therapist, that they will tell them the truth. And guess what? They won't have an excuse, and they'll have to do the hard thing.
Yeah.
The universal thing for you and Missy and Bob, my husband, and all of us is we don't like crosses.
No.
And guess what? We get to not like crosses. Jesus didn't like his cross, but he understood the value and the beauty of and the power of the cross, and so he went into it. So discernment is about being honest, submitting yourself on a regular basis to authority, to teaching, to counseling, to coaching, to confession.
Yeah, and maybe that hard thing that you've been avoiding is the leaving, and maybe that hard thing that you've been avoiding is you have no cause to leave. You need to work through this. You need help from others to help you know that.
And this is what I love to do. I help people who are in a situation where they say, I can't stand this anymore. I want to kill him or her. And first I have to say, I hear you. That must be hard. I cannot say, well, you should not feel that way and you should not think that way. This is real for them. And first they want to know that I understand them and I understand their pain. Then I say, there might be another way. Let's take a look. See how we can reinvent your marriage, how we can redesign it to get rid of some of the things that are really difficult for you, and to make it not just tolerable, but sweet in a certain sense. Maybe never you'll never have the marriage that you dreamed of, maybe.
No.
But that's not the end of the world.
No, right. It's not the end of the world.
I think every married couple really comes to that realization in some time, in some sense.
Yeah, because you marry a human being. I mean,
exactly.
It's a very humanizing institution, marriage, because you have to accept at least one flawed human being if you're going to stay. Well, two. You got to accept two flawed human beings. I mean, and it gets you in the habit of doing that if you stick with it. But all right, here's the deal. I know you got more points you wanted to make. We also have every line full here for you. So what do you want to do? You want to go back?
You're in charge.
All right,
no, I am the submissive one. You're the leader. Come on.
That is just not even true. I've known you for a while. Okay, all right, fine. 888-318-7884, the number. I'm going to go to a few calls. We'll let Grace, we'll get some graceful points from Rose, and then we'll go back to calls. We'll do it that way. So let's go to Bill in Tennessee, listening on 99.3 FM. Bill, go ahead with your question for our guest, Rose Sweet.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both. Rose, I was trying to think how to formulate my question best. The topic raises so many emotions in me and questions. What about us folks out here who are even recent converts, who are much older, who have just made a total mess out of their lives? Never heard any teachings from the Catholic Church. If your marriage works out, that's fine. Get married for any reason you want to. Never heard of a sacramental marriage, a good marriage, a legal. We just get married because we enjoy sex together. If it doesn't work out, well, we'll just see what we need to do then. And divorce is always an option, sometimes more than once. So what about folks, what should we be thinking about? I know the idea of living as brother and sister in the current marriage, but what kind of marriage do we even have if we've been married 2, 3, or 4 times?
Rose?
Well, that's a great question, Bill, and I can't give it a blanket answer because here's the truth. Each of those 2, 3, or 4 marriages involved different situations, circumstances, and people. And without knowing those, and here's what we have to remember in this discussion, without knowing the particulars of any marriage, nobody, not a priest, not the Pope, can go in and say what those people need to do. If we don't have enough information, we can't make that call. So that's it. Sadly, it takes the people to be open and to be honest and to share that information and work with somebody to get to the nugget of truth. It takes time. It's embarrassing. It's painful. You said it, Bill. It's painful memories. But it's worth it to open wide the gates, to access the fullness of powerful graces that God has for us to live in a way that's holy and happy and able to love another person the way they need to be loved. And that can look different in every different situation. So I know that's vague, but Bill, do you have another thing you want to add that maybe we could address?
Well, just to say that my wife, who is not Catholic, she's been very sweet and supportive about the whole thing. So in her own way, we're just living as brother and sister, and she doesn't care to go through the annulment process. We started it, but she just really backed away from it. And so I'm praying and waiting on her, and it may or may not ever happen. So I'm okay to live this way. But I think with that in mind, the other side of the coin, it being unfortunate where I've put myself all these years, that there are poor people out there like me who have no idea what they're doing with marriage, and this is the results. Multiple marriages.
Because we're not teaching it. Is that what you mean, Bill? That
not teaching it.
Yeah,
nobody is. In the Protestant faith, I can't say for the Catholics, maybe they could do a better job with us, but definitely in the Protestant faith that I grew up in. If it doesn't work, get a divorce, move on.
So if Bill's concern then is, okay, he's been through all of this. And then the first thing, Bill, is if you've completely messed up your life, the Catholic Church is the perfect place for you. Come on in, because all the rest of us, we've been through it. You should hear, I'm not saying this to be mean to Rose, but you should hear Rose's story sometime. Let her tell it to you sometime. This is not a church for people who haven't messed up. Let me tell you my story sometime. But Rose, I think Bill's question is how do we communicate this to people so that they don't have to go through what many of us have gone through in making a mess of things?
Let's go to the big picture. All the truths of our faith are presented from generation to generation, and each generation says, "Why didn't I hear that?" in a certain sense.
Yeah.
So the truth is, we are teaching it. It is accessible. It is available. But we're not hearing about it at the local parish or wherever we are. So the truth is we're doing a good job, but we're not doing it enough. And I think that's true all the time. So then that's where the person, fall on your knees before the Lord and say, Lord, if there's anything else you need me to have or want me to have, show me where it is. It's there. And that's why thank you to Catholic Answers for having people like me on to go to those scary, dark, embarrassing, painful places and talk about it so you can get the truth. So, Bill.
And thank God for Bill.
Brother.
Just think of the thousands of people, of young people who are hearing what you have to say, Bill. Don't try to get it right early, and the later years, many burdens are not there. Bill, I think you've done that. I feel the same way about all Catholic radio, Rose, that it is at least getting this message out there so that people like you and me and Bill, we can talk honestly about it, and young people can hear it, and maybe that will make some sense to them. Bill, do you want to say anything else?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Knowing what I know now after all these decades, I would say if I had a chance to do it over again, I would marry in the Catholic Church. I would do it right the first time, knowing what I was walking into, and I would make no allowance for walking away from it unless it's the areas that Rose has already covered where there's a danger to someone, so on and so forth.
God bless you,
And you
Bill.
just stick it out. The grass is not greener on the other side. As a matter of fact, it gets worse. In a
That's
sense,
so
because
true.
you're stepping further away from God, even though there's someone you might enjoy being with and you've got a good second or third marriage, that's fine, but you've stepped away from what God intended initially. Get it right from the beginning the best you can, and then don't walk away from God.
Well, Bill, thanks for the call, man. I hope they're listening out there, because there's a reason why we have the gospel, why we have the church. It's for our happiness. It's not for our misery. Rose Sweet also here for our happiness, and she does bring happiness when she comes. More with Rose right after this. Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and He desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of His will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today, or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Coming up tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. What was your first job and how did it define you? That's tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Very serious topic, very great guest this hour. Rose Sweet is here to talk with us about divorce, the Catholic perspective on divorce, whether you're Catholic or not, or as our last caller, Bill, not for a long time, but in the church now. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We'll do one more call, and then I know you got some more points. You know how we're going to do this, Rose, back and forth. Let's go to Victoria. Yep. In Battleground, Washington. Perfect place to be married. Battleground, Washington. Listening on Mater Dei Radio. Victoria, thank you so much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Hi, my question is, what makes a marriage valid?
Oh, what makes marriage valid? All right. And you sound like you might not be married yet yourself, Victoria. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
All right.
Well, okay, so marriage is different than any other human relationship. We can love a lot of people, but that doesn't mean we marry them. So marriage is set apart, and this is from church teachings, that's not our opinion, that marriage is between a man and a woman of a certain age, and that they promise to love each other and to be faithful to each other sexually and otherwise till death. So it's a fullness of their self, and there's no option for divorce. They're going to tough it through however they can do, and that they are open to the gift of children. And so that's what sets a marriage apart. And when both parties understand that, enter into it freely with no pressure, no compulsion, no agendas, and totally, not partially, all the way for both of them, then the church presumes that at the moment they say I do and they give that consent, a valid marriage bond comes into being, and nothing can break that except death. So that's a beautiful thing that images the bond that Jesus, the bridegroom, has with us, the bride. He's faithful to us. He'll never abandon us. He's with us to the end. And he wants us to open our hearts so widely that he will penetrate us with his divine life and love and make us spiritually and emotionally fruitful, and to bring his love out into the world. So our idea of marriage is not separate at all, but really goes hand in hand with the marriage that Jesus has with his bride.
Now, what do you think of that, Victoria? Does that inspire you, or does it make sense to you?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay, not exactly inspired.
Do you want that? Do you want that for yourself, Victoria?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
we'll pray for you, and I know many listeners are praying for you that comes your way, Victoria. God bless you. Thank you so much for the call. However, Rose, I will say this. That exact teaching that you just gave was given by Jesus, and the apostles said, then why would anyone get married? That was their reaction to Jesus. Well, why would anyone get married then?
Well, and that was a good question, because that opened the door to the further teaching. And I heard you and Carlo the other day discussing this.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not simple. Some people say, look, marriage is simple. It's natural law. You should just understand it. It's easy. You get married, you stay together no matter what. No, it's not so easy. And Jesus, wanted to go further and say to the disciples, some people are not capable of marriage. Some people, and we can go off on a whole tangent, but listen to the Catholic Answers podcast that you've had before, and the shows and the articles, because this is a deep subject that you and I can't appropriately address in a second.
Fair enough.
But don't be afraid to say to Jesus or anybody else, or to the church or anybody, well, then we shouldn't just get married because it's too hard. And that's why Jesus is saying, yeah, it's hard, but I have overcome the world. I'm here to give you grace. You can go higher. This is where you find total happiness, and this is how you do it. And the church has taken Jesus' teachings and expanded it to help us explain in more detail. Just like if I told you how to make a margarita, I could name the ingredients and tell you to shake it up. But really, you might want to know what kind of limes and what kind of salt and what's the best tequila. So sometimes it's not so simple. And this topic about marriage and divorce and annulment, it's not so simple. And everybody has to remember, it's beautiful, it's true, but we have to enter into it with an open mind and be patient as we allow the church to teach us the fullness of what God gave us, the fullness of what Jesus gave us.
Some have made an argument, and in very, very good faith, about that the abortion arguments are used for those who are trying to teach divorce. There's without question that's true, that these arguments are very similar. For example, people will argue, well, that abortion frees people from burdens that they can't carry. And the other people will say, well, divorce frees people from burdens they can't carry. And it's undoubtedly true that the same arguments are made. But I note that you don't find this fully, you don't see this as the most fruitful way to talk about all this.
Yes, it's limiting. So what you said is true. Here's the excuses for sin are the same.
Yeah.
Not just abortion and not just divorce, but every serious sin. It was too hard. I couldn't do it. It doesn't make sense. God wants me to be happy. All the excuses are the same.
Yes.
What's not the same is the church never allows for abortion. Never. It's the killing of another human person. The church does permit, in certain circumstances, divorce. So that's where the two are different. And to try to lump them in without making that distinction can cause a lot of people to be confused.
I got you. So the teaching of the church is different on these two matters, despite the fact that, like you said, I suppose we always justify any sin we want to engage in using the same basic. We only have a limited toolkit of justifications.
Right. And the older we get, we've heard them all. So they're both grave evils.
No.
But they're different. There is a difference. So it's the hot fudge sundae. There's things that are the same, and there's things that are very different. And that's, it takes work to be a good Christian. It takes work to not just take things at face value and make it and oversimplify it. It takes really work to go into it.
That seems a bug for you, particularly that people oversimplify. That we look, just stick it out, which actually is really true almost all the time. Yes. Just stick it out. God has, whether you're a monk or a priest or whatever, the vocation that God has given you, stick with it through thick and thin. You'll be happy that you did. But there is a level of complexity to it as well.
Yes, exactly. So there are people, let's say he was a violent rapist and he was sexually abusing all the children and gambling away their money and shooting up heroin. We would never say to that person, just stick it out.
No, that's true.
We'd say, run and let us help you sort it out.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and yourself. It's not just the children. The children are deeply wounded. Okay, so the reality is that both can be true. And here's where the fear comes in. The people who are saying, just stick it out, and they're right, are afraid that the people who don't stick it out are using it as an excuse. They're afraid that they're being weak and sinful and loosey-goosey. And really, people are afraid that the whole church is going to crumble. The whole moral system is going to crumble. If those people keep taking our church laws and watering them down, what's going to happen?
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying.
The truth is, it can get worse. It'll be bad, but Jesus shows us that. We know this is the way of the world, and we do need to fight it, but not to lose our serenity and our peace.
Yeah.
Jesus helps restore that to hold both truths in tension, in that tension.
I'm gonna ask you one more question, and then I am gonna go to callers because there's a lot of callers. But I mean, the Catholic Church actually is pretty good at marriage prep. We're better than almost any other organization, but it still just doesn't seem to get through to people. Like, we still have so much Catholic divorce. Should we be a little bit meaner about allowing people to get married?
Well, this is another complex question. Here's the thing. The bar for marriage is set low, as some have said, so that everybody can enter into it, right?
Right. You have a right to marry. Yes, that's right.
Okay, you have a right to marry. But the bar for authentic marriage isn't low. The bar for entry is low. But the bar for authentic marriage is not low. In fact, Jesus told us he raised it to the level of a sacrament.
Right.
It's hard. It's noble. It's high. It's fruitful. It's life-giving. It's the bedrock of our whole culture. It's not just a low thing. It's a very high thing. And therefore, we need grace and we need instruction to do it right. So, yeah, I hear a lot of priests who've said, I know I shouldn't marry this couple. I see the big red flags, but they won't listen, and they have the right to the sacrament. So what I have done, and a lot of people in tribunals and parishes that I know, is that when we see a young couple that, or even an older couple, and they're attempting marriage, and it's danger, wrong, no, write that out. Write a letter. Put it in their marriage file. So if it does come crashing and burning down, and hopefully not, years later, they can go back to that and reference, wow, from the very beginning, there were lies, there were secrets, there were agendas, or something very, very serious in the way.
Yeah.
So
I see what you're saying.
We could talk about this all day, but people have a right to enter marriage, but that doesn't mean that they're capable of marriage. People have a right to enter marriage. I had never thought about
it that way. Yeah. All right. I have to take a break, Rose. I apologize for that. We'll take this break. We'll be right back. We'll take more calls for Rose Sweet on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Rose Sweet, our guest. We're talking about abortion with Rose. You can find her at rosesweet.com. And yes, that is actually her name, Rose Sweet.
Abortion? Did you say abortion?
No. Did I say abortion?
We're talking about divorce.
Did I say that? Okay. See, yes, I did. I said the wrong thing. And I don't know why my making a mistake is hilarious to the women on the other side of the glass here. I don't know why they find that so funny. But, okay, I apologize. We're talking about divorce. We did talk about abortion related to divorce moments ago.
We did.
But
we did.
I apologize. We are talking. Then the next hour is about abortion. Thank you for helping me. Was that you that typed that, Marie? Okay, so now Marie's helping me. Okay, back.
Wait, sorry,
I'm going to the phones.
I want to point out,
Yeah.
I listen to every word you say.
I know that this is the problem. This is what gets me in trouble when people listen to me. If they would not listen, I would make fewer mistakes. 888-318-7884, the number. I can't even remember what I was doing, so I'm going to David in Arizona watching on YouTube Live. David, thank you so much for your call. Go ahead with your question for our guest, Rose Sweet.
Yes, a little background. I have a son who's 38 years old, never has been married, has been practicing the faith, has found the love of his life, who is also Catholic, but who's been divorced. Now, my question is, he tells me that if they decide they wanted to get married together in a civil ceremony while they await an annulment, that as a parent and his brothers and sisters could not attend that marriage or that ceremony. Is that true?
Oh, your son who's thinking about doing this told you that you couldn't come.
Exactly.
Well, that I have to say that's not one that I have heard before. But Rose, what's the truth about that?
Well, it's kind of a reverse situation. Usually people who marry civilly without an annulment want everybody to come around them to support their decision. And that puts those of us who are their family members in a position to say, no, we can't publicly support that.
Right.
Or even privately. Let's go back to the reality. She's still married in the eyes of the church. She said, I do. And until she can take her enough evidence to a competent tribunal with reliable witnesses to show the tribunal that were grounds for nullity, she's still married, and that marriage bond lasts until one of them passes away. So your son is objectively committing adultery. And no, we don't like to hear those words. That sounds so harsh and judgmental, but that's the truth. And I love that the Catholic Church is the last one standing for the marriage bond, for the unbreakability of it. So your son and his girlfriend need some coaching, and you give them my email address and tell them I would give them some free consultation. Let me introduce the beauty of the truth and the benefits that come from taking the high road. Right now, they're blocking themselves from graces and even divine life. Let me help you if I can.
So they're seeking the annulment, David. Is that correct?
That's correct. They're seeking the annulment, but they're afraid that the annulment will not be finished by the time they wish to get married. So they thought, well, maybe we could go with a civil ceremony, but if they did that, then their family can't come. And he's aware of that. He doesn't like it, but he maintains that's the fact. I don't know.
Yeah, well, he's got the facts right. He
does have the fact, and you don't want to participate in a very serious violation of the marriage vow. He is violating her existing marriage vow, and it's usually because nobody's explained this to him in a way that makes sense to him. I know that when we work with people and explain it that makes sense, they get it and they choose the high path. So I'll if I can help in any way, please let me.
So how do we give him your email address? Just go to
rose@rosesweet.com.
Rose@rosesweet.com.
Rose@rosesweet.com. And my website is rosesweet.com.
Thanks, David. Do avail give that to your son and have him avail himself of Rose's offer, because I think it might be helpful. And it's just, in this case, a matter of a bit of patience to get an answer. That would, well, anyways, I'll let you deal with that when you talk with them, Rose.
Well, and you know what? It's not just patience. It is not realizing the damage they're doing now and not realizing the powerful, beautiful graces that they could get later. So it's not just patience, it's not understanding what's going on.
Evita in the San Gabriel Valley here in California. Delighted to have you, a fellow Californian. Evita, go ahead with your question for Rose.
It's not a question, it's more like a point of clarification.
Okay.
I really like everything that I'm hearing from Miss Rose Sweet, and thank you for educating us. Because we are lacking a whole lot of that. However, I really cringe every time she uses the word divorce, because I think that further sows confusion in all our listeners who are trying to get to educate themselves and inform themselves. Because in the Catholic world, there is no divorce, okay? Because if I understand this correctly, a marriage will be annulled, which means, okay, they were not, they didn't willfully enter, well-informed, and all the criteria for creating a sacramental marriage. So it never really was a marriage. Since there wasn't a marriage, there isn't a divorce. There is an annulment. So I'm concerned that I keep hearing the word divorce and divorce and divorce when the Catholic Church doesn't recognize a divorce.
All right, Evita, I'll tell you what, let's let Rose respond, and then I'll come back to you and see if her response is adequate for you. Rose, what do you make of that?
Evita, I love this point of clarification. Thank you for bringing it up. And you're right, there is no such thing as Catholic divorce. But Catholics do end up in the civil divorce court. So when we do say the word divorce, we should clarify we're talking about civil divorce. And that's a beautiful point that we should remember. But here's another point of clarification. Not all valid marriages are sacramental. So just because two people get married, even, a Catholic person, doesn't mean that it's sacramental. Really what the church is saying is there a valid marriage bond there. And we don't also say that there was no marriage, because let me ask you this, and this is a great conversation. Did they go down to the courthouse and get a license? It's a civil license. But so was there a marriage? Yes, there was a civil marriage, but there wasn't a marriage in the way the church understands. And that's another, thank you for opening the door for me to throw that one out, because people cringe like you did when they hear, well, you didn't really have a marriage. And you're like going, I had a mortgage and 10 kids. What do you mean I didn't have a marriage?
Yeah.
You had a civil marriage and you had shared life and there was a lot of good. So you're right, Evita. Terms are so important.
Evita, how does that sit with you?
Yes, that is another excellent point, and I understand that as well. So maybe more clarification just on both sides. We're talking about the Catholic sacrament of marriage. So when I'm speaking about the Catholic sacrament of marriage, there shouldn't be a divorce in the same sentence.
No, but when especially for children, I always think about children who are the children of a divorced mother and father. If they had a civil divorce, the children don't become illegitimate children or something. I think there's a lot of anxiety about that because there is civil marriage, and there is sacramental marriage. Civil marriage is marriage. The church recognizes natural marriage and civil marriage as marriages, but they don't necessarily mean there was also a sacramental marriage. Am I getting it right, Rose, or am I making a mess of it?
Almost. They also don't recognize there was validity. Because here's the thing. If I married an unbaptized guy and we got permission from the bishop, right, we would have a valid marriage bond, but it wouldn't be a sacrament. No sacramental marriage, but valid. The church would recognize our marriage as valid, because sacramentality only comes into the picture when both people are validly baptized Christians. Not even Catholic, just validly baptized Christians. Then we have presumed they have a valid marriage bond and a sacramental layer on top of that.
Evita, I'm going to say thanks because I want to get everybody on that wants to talk with Rose. I will say what Rose said before, though. Sometimes these things become so complex, they're easier if you get them in writing, and we have lots of that at Catholic.com. If you want to just type in divorce, annulment, remarriage, these various terms into Catholic.com, just dozens and dozens of articles that help to clarify what the church is teaching and what Jesus taught about marriage. I want to get to Tim in Vancouver, Washington, however, before we go. So I'm going to go to Tim. Tim, you have short time. I apologize for that, but you have a short time with Rose. So quickly, go ahead.
It's okay. I'll catch you guys another time too. I'm 2 years baptized Catholic. Okay. I love the Catholic faith. It's something that God called me to, that led me to.
Praise God.
But thanks be to God, yes. But my wife was born Catholic, raised Catholic. So when I met her, I didn't want a physical relationship. I wanted a friendship, but she wanted more. So who was I to deny her that physical relationship, and without knowing anything about the Catholic faith, and denying her kids? So long story short, we moved here to Vancouver. Her father came here. I mean, it had to be a blessing because his father said, well, what are you doing? I haven't seen you go to Mass once. So next thing you know, she started looking at Mass, and then I end up going to RCIA class. And got to know the faith, and so we end up getting married 2 years ago in the church. Okay, which was the best thing for me. But my wife, all of a sudden I lost my mom during the COVID. I lost my job. And then another guy came to work with her, which I used to work with. I worked there. She started seeing him. I called her twice there. And she says they're just friends. I said, no woman in her right mind goes without another friend or woman.
Tim, I hate to disrupt you, but something happened, and you got to tell Rose what it is so that she can give you an answer, because we're down to seconds now. What's the thing that happened that you want to answer from Rose?
I just want to know if it's okay that I'm seeking going to get the divorce. She wants the divorce, but she.
Rose, any words? Maybe you want to let Tim get in touch with you too. I don't know.
Yes, please. I can't answer it. I don't have enough information, but reach out to me, rosesweet.com, to my website, and I just remind me who you are, and I will work with you. I'll help you the best I can.
Yeah, in particular cases, it's hard to do it in a short time. And Tim, sorry we weren't able to have a little more time with you to get more clarity for you. But you can get clarity by contacting Rose at rosesweet.com. Just Rose at rosesweet.com. Rose, you're a superstar. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I love you guys. See you soon.
Very soon, I hope.
Yes, next month, I think.
Okay, good. All right, good. We'll see you then.
Don't forget the Hot Fudge Sundae.
Oh, see, now you're just making my life harder. I'm trying to be good, Rose, but thank you very much. And I won't forget the Hot Fudge Sundae. A Hot Fudge Sundae is both hot and cold, and the church's teaching on divorce is one that requires some subtlety to get both sides of it. Next, Open Forum, Pro-Life Open Forum with Stephanie Gray. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and I think I misspoke last hour, and I won't review what I misspoke about. I'll just say this. This hour is for pro-choice folks. Why are you pro-choice? If you are a pro-choice person, if you believe in abortion in any stage of pregnancy or at any time, then you're a pro-choice person. At least, even if it's, I only believe in abortion in the first trimester or something like that. Yes, that qualifies, and you're welcome to call, and we'd love to talk with you about why you have made that choice to be a pro-choice person. We don't hide the fact that we are pro-life people. We are pro-life Catholics, in fact, but we love to have those conversations. We think it's very productive to have those conversations, and we invite your call, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884, and we've got a great guest for you to talk to about abortion today, Stephanie Gray Connors, internationally renowned pro-life speaker, the founder of Love Unleashes Life, the author of Start With What? 10 Principles for Thinking About Assisted Suicide, as well as Love Unleashes Life, Abortion and the Art of Communicating Truth. Stephanie Gray Connors, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me back on, Cy.
The author of two more things, a book that will come out. You're doing a book on in vitro fertilization. That will come out sometime. And the author of a baby boy or girl, I don't know which, come on.
That's right. We don't know either.
Publishing date, August.
Publishing date August, yes. Although I feel like publishing date could be now.
You do feel that way. I think Marie might be feeling that way. Her publishing date for Junior is Junior. I should say Cyril. We all know that the baby will be named Cyril, whether it's a boy or a girl. It's going to be named Cyril. But her publishing date is in September. Do you sometimes feel like it's? Yeah, she does. She looks tired today.
I'm tired every day.
I think she's tired of me, though. I think that's it. Well, congratulations again on the new baby. First of all, say something about the IVF book that's coming out, in vitro fertilization, because people might want to talk about that with you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my kind of expertise is apologetics. It's how to argue, how to defend a point of view, and particularly using the Socratic approach of asking questions and making analogies or telling stories. And I've done that at the beginning of life with abortion and then end of life with assisted suicide. And as I was doing research on another topic, that of in vitro fertilization, I saw a great need to really help equip people to think wisely on that issue, because there's a lot of confusion on it. And so my book will be taking the same style as my other books with apologetics, and it will be making both sectarian and non-sectarian arguments. For anyone, even if they're not religious, I'll be talking about how in vitro fertilization threatens the lives of some preborn children in order to create other children. It really commodifies the human person, treats humans as objects. But then I dive deeper, and some people will say, well, what if you don't make too many embryos? What if you don't use sperm or egg sellers, but you just use a married couple's sperm and egg? Does that make in vitro fertilization morally acceptable? So that's really then when I go into a sectarian argument explaining why even in those narrow circumstances, it's still morally objectionable, and I kind of unpack that. And so I'm excited for it to come out. So I'm trying to get it written before the baby comes, and then I will release it after the birth.
Our number, 888-318-7884. Stephanie Gray Connors is our guest, and you are welcome to call if you are a pro-choice person. If at any stage in life you believe in abortion, for example, then you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Many people who set limits on what they when they will tolerate abortion will say to us, I'm not sure if I'm a pro-choice person. But and so in fairness, I say that, look, if you believe in abortion, I only believe in abortion with the morning after pill, for example, or something like that, or in the very earliest stages. Still, we would say that that's a pro-choice position, wouldn't we, Stephanie?
Absolutely. And we want to hear from those people to be able to unpack what the pro-life perspective is and really understand why they think it would be acceptable very early in pregnancy or by a particular means, such as a chemical means. So we welcome and invite that perspective.
888-318-7884, our number. We hold the phones for pro-choice folks today. So thank you for all of our many pro-life listeners and supporters for leaving those lines open so the pro-choice people get a chance to call. 888-318-7884. Sometimes when we do these programs, people are like, I'm amazed at how many pro-choice people listen. Well, there are lots of pro-choice Catholics, for example, probably sitting in church with you on Sunday, many pro-choice Christians. Those are all welcome to call, but also we have many secular listeners as well. All welcome. 888-318-7884. Is in vitro fertilization an issue of that's related to abortion? I mean, it seems to me that I don't know if you've had this experience, Stephanie, but I don't find anybody who's ever surprised that the Catholic Church is opposed to abortion. There's never anyone who goes, I didn't know that. I never meet anyone who's surprised that the Catholic Church is opposed to suicide. No one ever says, really? But I meet all kinds of people who are shocked that the Catholic Church is opposed to in vitro fertilization. So how are these related?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you're right. A lot of people think, well, wait, if the church is all about creating life and seeing children as a blessing, then wouldn't using IVF be something the church supports? And one of the problems, amongst many, but one of the problems with IVF is it's directly related to abortion, because some preborn children are aborted through IVF, whether it's prior to implantation or after implantation. So with IVF, babies aren't created through sexual intimacy, but are created by a third party, some type of scientist, medical professional in a lab who puts sperm and egg together in a petri dish. And then those children, many are sometimes created, sometimes 10, 15, even 20 embryos. Well, you can't implant all of those embryos at one time. So usually the embryos go through a weeding out process where 1 or 2 will be implanted immediately. Maybe 5 or so will be frozen for possible use for implantation at a later date, but that isn't often guaranteed. Then you could have 5 or 10 embryos that die in the process, that are just disposed of right away, and that kills them, or they're used for scientific research, which is like as evil as experimenting on Jews during the Holocaust. It's experimenting on a human body. And then even when some embryos are implanted, once the baby starts to grow in the mom's body, that mother might choose to have prenatal pregnancy testing. And that testing might show her child has Down syndrome. And there have been cases where couples desperately wanted a child, pursued IVF, had an embryo implanted, found out they have a Down syndrome child, and then they've had an abortion of that particular child. So we see with IVF the destruction of human life, in some cases upon its creation before implantation, and in other cases when the resulting child isn't the standard that the parents wanted, which reinforces the kind of manufacturing element of in vitro fertilization, that it's kind of that commodification. When you buy something in the store, you want it to be in pristine condition, and if it's not, you return it and you expect a replacement. And so sadly, when you have that mentality, when it comes to the creation of life, that we're manufacturing, we're trying to get a certain specimen, then if that specimen doesn't line up and you have a child who's quote unquote less than perfect, in some cases, certainly not all, but sadly some people will then end that child's life because of some genetic anomaly.
Stephanie Gray Connors is our guest, and if you are a pro-choice person, we welcome your call, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We'll start with Casey in Chicago, Illinois, listening to EWTN, Channel 130 on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Casey, go ahead with your question for Stephanie.
Hey there, Stephanie. So it's a funny conundrum, because I definitely don't see myself as pro-choice. I believe in life, at conception, but where I struggle as a Catholic is I understand a woman's need in the case of rape or incest, or in the life of the mother when she has other children that need that mother. And I had to pose the question to my child's religion teacher in junior high, because I struggle with that as a mom of 3. Gosh, what if I had another, and having that baby would take my life away from my existing. So I think as a woman, a mother, a faithful, it's a really hard struggle to put that into perspective with our faith.
I mean, certainly I can't even imagine, being a mother now. leaving my child orphan. So that's never something that we want to envision happening. Maybe I could ask you this. If someone wasn't pregnant, is it still possible that their life could be ended and their husband left a widower and their children orphaned? Like if a woman just develops cancer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And would you acknowledge that, let's say it's not the case of cancer. Let's say you have a woman who has some serious heart condition, and unless she gets a heart transplant, she will die, leaving her husband a widower and her children orphaned. Now, let's say that the wait list is so long, there is no way for her to get a heart that she would be able to survive long enough. And so she thinks to herself, okay, I've heard in China that the Chinese government are arresting practitioners of Falun Gong, who are people who espouse a particular spirituality. And the Chinese government is arresting these people and actually harvesting their organs on the black market. So would it be ethical for the woman who can't get a heart in America to fly to China, go kind of in the black market, find a surgeon over there who will take a heart from a Falun Gong practitioner and implant it in the woman who needs the transplant so that she can return to America and not leave her children orphaned? Would that be ethical?
Heavens, no.
Correct. Right. So you and I agree. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what that little thought experiment or analogy shows both you and me, which we're on common ground on that, is that we acknowledge, as terrible as it would be to leave your children orphaned and leave your husband a widower, that we can't do just anything to avoid that tragedy from happening, that there are certain things that are off limits to us, such as unethically harvesting organs from someone. And that's clear in that case. So then the situation becomes, what if a pregnant woman's life is in danger? So I would say the same standard applies, that there are certain things that are off limits to us. Just as it's unethical to harvest someone's organs, it would be unethical to directly and intentionally end one's child's life through abortion. Now, saying that abortion is off limits to us, as tragic as it would be if the woman died and her husband's left with the children, as tragic as that would be, and as much as abortion is off limits to us, it doesn't follow that there's nothing that can be done. So when a woman's life is in danger, there typically are alternatives to abortion that can be pursued. And sometimes we can save both the mother and the child. Other times we don't have the technology to save the child because the baby's very young. But there's a big difference between directly killing the child and not being able to save the child. What are your thoughts on that?
I would totally agree. Totally agree with that. I completely, and if my daughter, God forbid, came home pregnant, there would be no option. We'd have the baby, we'd raise it, we'd find an option. As hard as that would be, but I just, as a mom, you struggle, right? I don't know how I feel, if I have this baby, and then how does my husband look at this baby and love the baby, knowing that, the baby took mommy, and it's a hard moral to live with, I think, and I agree. I'm definitely not, but it's a struggle. It's one of those personal things that I do struggle with in my own confession, and it's selfish, and I guess that's why I'm human.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, Casey, it's important to remember too that whenever we hold a certain worldview, it doesn't mean every aspect of living that view out is going to be easy. In fact, typically what it means is there's going to be very hard times. And what comes to mind is one of the saints in our church, Saint Gianna Beretta Mola, who got married later in life, had, I think it was 3 children, and with her 4th pregnancy, there were complications and they were concerned about her life being in danger. And she said, if you have to choose the child over me. And ultimately it came to, she wasn't able to survive, but they were able to, the baby was able to survive. And yes, on one hand, it's a terrible sorrow and grief that her husband went on living without his wife. but he also knows that his wife is a saint, that in a sense she was a martyr who was willing to give her life for the other, which is at the same time as all of this is very difficult. It's a reminder to us this world we're in is not our home. We are pilgrims on a journey to another home. And why we're here is to learn to love so we can love perfectly in that next world. And what is love? I mean, the scriptures tell us greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. And so there's an understandable grief and sorrow that any man would have in losing his wife. And yet there is something to be celebrated, which is to know that the goal of any husband and wife is to get their spouse to heaven. And job well done. She's in heaven and praying and interceding that her husband will one day join her. Doesn't make it easy, doesn't make it without grief or sorrow, but it puts a broader perspective on even what our life is for.
And I got to leave it there. Casey, thank you so much for the call. It's a pro-choice open forum. If you are pro-choice, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connection's set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connection's website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Why do we need to pray? We don't pray because God needs our prayers. We pray because we need God's grace. And every day when I face the day, I realize I have no idea what I'm doing. And I need God to walk me through my day, step by step, giving me the grace, the counsel, the love, the encouragement that enables me to glorify Him in everything that I do and become the person He wants me to be. Prayer is my lifeline.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Lots and lots of folks who listen to this program are pro-choice folks, and maybe you're just catching us by chance and you are a pro-choice person and you'd like to call. We love to have those conversations, not hiding at all the fact that we are entirely pro-life. Your call is welcome here if you are a pro-choice person. If you'd like to argue a point, that's welcome. Or if you're just, as our last caller, just maybe struggling over what the church has to say and what basic moral teaching has to say about treating life unborn, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884 with your question, with your argument. 888-318-7884. Stephanie Gray Connors is our guest. She is an internationally renowned pro-life speaker and has debated these issues many times and loves to have these conversations. She is the founder of Love Unleashes Life and the author of a couple books, including Start With What? 10 Principles for Thinking About Assisted Suicide. Again, holding the phones for pro-choice folks. So if you are a pro-choice person, you'd really help us out, actually, if you'd give us a call, 888-318-7884. Up next, we go to New Jersey, listening on 89.3 FM Ann in New Jersey. Thanks so much for your call. Go ahead with your question or comment for Stacey Gray Connors.
Stephanie, you just called me Stacey.
This is the worst day for me. I am having a terrible day. I apologize. Go ahead with your question. It's Stephanie, not Stacey, but go ahead with your question.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ann. I'm calling from New Jersey. I converted to Catholicism 3 years ago, but I guess by your definition, I would be pro-choice because I'm not comfortable with the church recommending to non-Catholics that they don't get an abortion. I guess maybe I need that unpacked. For example, some people who, if they don't believe in the church's reason to be against abortion, they're against abortion for another reason that doesn't agree with the church. And so that's why I'm not comfortable with it, for one thing.
Sure. I appreciate your call, Ann, and I think you raise a valid point. And maybe to unpack that, one of the things I could ask you to consider is, are there other teachings that the Catholic Church has that aren't directly related to abortion that you believe people who aren't Catholic should embrace?
Oh gosh, that's a complicated question. Can you elaborate on that? Because that's a
sure. Fair enough. Yeah, let me maybe give an example. So even if we take the Ten Commandments, the church teaches, and not just the Catholic Church, I mean, any Judeo-Christian would teach this, but certainly the Catholic Church teaches you shouldn't steal, and that you shouldn't kill. So do you think that a civil society should have laws against stealing and killing, even though those are standards the Catholic Church holds as well, and the civil society might not be a Catholic society? Do you still think there should be laws against stealing and killing? Okay. Yes. So then what that shows is we recognize there are certain fundamental truths that while a particular religion or denomination may embrace, someone who doesn't hold that denomination or religion can still reasonably embrace those views. And we've agreed that killing and theft and the wrongness of those two things are two examples. So then when it comes to abortion, the question is, what does abortion do and who does it target? And what I'll often point out is that when a woman gets a negative pregnancy test, she never goes to an abortion clinic, because the negative test is basically telling her it's just your body, no other body here. But why, when a woman gets a positive pregnancy test and doesn't want to be pregnant, does she consider going to an abortion clinic? Well, the positive test is telling her it's not just your body anymore, there's another body present. So what does abortion do to that other body? And very clearly, it directly targets the body for destruction to end the life of one's offspring. So if we believe any civil society should have laws against theft of property that's not even a person, or laws against killing, let's say, a 10-year-old, then wouldn't it logically follow that well beyond just a Catholic view, from a human rights perspective, a civil society should have a law against a parent directly ending the life of their preborn offspring?
Yeah, that follows. But doesn't the Catechism say that the Catholic Church doesn't undertake to make recommendations to people over whom it doesn't have authority, however regrettable it might be that it doesn't have authority over them?
I'm not sure of that specific reference. I've not heard of that. If it were to be there, and if you actually have the number, I'm open to hearing that. But if that were to be there, okay, no worries. My understanding is, let's hypothetically say that's there, that would relate more to aspects of the faith, reception of communion. Who's eligible to receive communion? Are you in a state of mortal sin, or are you not? Are you a member of the Catholic Church, or are you not? There are certain things that pertain to fundamental aspects of the living out of the faith that would apply to people that are members of the church. But then I would say there are certain truths that go beyond the faith that are just really from a human rights perspective. So if we think theft is wrong, if we think homicide is wrong, if we think rape is wrong, for example, you don't need to be Catholic to agree that all those things are wrong. So then what I would suggest is, although Catholics are taught that abortion is wrong, someone doesn't have to be Catholic to come to the conclusion that biologically the child in the womb is a separate entity from the mother, is actual offspring from the mother, and therefore has a right to protection from his or her parent, not harm being inflicted upon him from his parent, and therefore abortion ought to be rejected from that perspective, whether someone is Catholic or not. Does that help?
It does, but I still have to do more reading and unpack, I guess, because I feel like if the Church herself does not tell non-Catholics that what they should do with their bodies, then like the power of numbers in a voting type of democracy for Catholic people to be against non-Catholics getting abortions is that they are banding together to do something that the Catholic Church herself isn't trying to do. I just need to read some more, probably.
Sure. And I would recommend, if you go to my website, which is loveunleasheslife.com, my book is on there that specifically addresses abortion. So hopefully that will help you. Trent Horn, who works with Catholic Answers. Great. Yeah. So please go there. And then Trent Horn works with Catholic Answers, and he's kind of teased this issue out in depth and explained it. But I would point out with just the last little remark you made about, can the Catholic Church tell someone what to do with their body? That's why when it comes to pregnancy, the fundamental question is it only one person's body, or are there two people's bodies? And again, the very fact that a woman is pursuing abortion indicates there's another body present. And so therefore, do we have a responsibility as mothers to meet the basic needs of our offspring? And as a civil society, whether someone is in a Catholic culture or not, any civil society would say parents have to meet the basic needs of their offspring. And that for the born child is food, clothing, and shelter. And that for the preborn child would be the food and the shelter of the placenta and the uterus.
Okay, this is going to be hard. I have to get more informed on the issue, but thank you so much for getting me started.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much for your call. That's why we love having these conversations. Anne, thank you so much. Stephanie Gray Connors is our guest. If you're a pro-choice person, this hour has been reserved for you. 888-318-7884. Only pro-choice folks. Rest of the hour on Catholic Answers Live. 888-31 Truth.
We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
According to divine command, we should give God worship, but how do we know if we're doing it right? Is worship a form of self-help to make me feel better, a form of social activism, or even a commodity? Or is it something that transcends all of those? In Real Religion, How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth, Father Jeff Kirby cuts through the misguided modern notions about God and religion and takes you back to the foundation for true worship, God's revelation about himself. From his first contact with his chosen people to the culmination of his revelation in Jesus Christ, God shows us what religion is supposed to be like and how to make the practice of it a lifelong virtue in our lives. Order your copy of Real Religion by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Coming up tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. What was your first job and how did it define you? That's tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Our favorite ukulele playing pro-life speaker, Stephanie Gray Connors, who has played the ukulele for us before and almost had time to do it at that break, but we got to it too late. Sorry, we didn't get to hear the ukulele, but next time maybe. Lots of folks on the line for you now, though, and it's this hour is for pro-choice people. If you are a pro-choice person, you're welcome to call. We'd love to have these conversations. As a matter of fact, I have to say I have a little bit of pride about this. I mean, I hope that it's healthy and good pride and not bad pride, but I don't think you hear these conversations anywhere else in media. I think you got to go to Catholic radio to get conversations where pro-choice people are allowed to call, make their points, have an adult conversation with people who respect them. I don't see any news outlets doing this. They've got hours and hours on cable TV, and they don't do this where they have respectful conversations like this. So I want you to know you're welcome. Stephanie Gray is here, and she's happy to have these conversations with you. As a matter of fact, no matter how
no
hard...
cancel culture here.
No cancel culture, right. And I say this with confidence, no matter how hard your challenge is, we want it here. And I say that with confidence because I don't have to answer the question. Stephanie does. Let's go to St. Louis, Missouri, watching on YouTube. William in St. Louis, Missouri. Thanks for your call, William. Go ahead with your question or comment for for Stephanie. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking my question. So it's basically, does the Catholic Church distinguish between degrees, saying like the term in which an abortion is exercised? So very early, midterm, very late term. Are those distinguished? And then the question would be, is contraception tantamount to abortion?
Okay, let's take them as two separate questions then. We'll start with the first one.
Sure.
Is there a moral distinction as far as the Catholic Church views it from a late-term abortion to, say, a very, very early-term abortion? Are these morally distinct things?
Yeah, that's a great question, William. And I would say the question for the church is not how old is the victim, but what is the victim? In other words, is the person whose life is ended a member of the species Homo sapiens? And so because a pregnant woman is human, because her partner is human, and because they are of a species that reproduces sexually, which means in that species, of any species that reproduces sexually, life begins at fertilization. It means the moment of conception or fertilization, you have another human being who happens to be offspring of the male and female. So therefore, once you have a member of the human family, it is objectionable, it is unethical, it is morally wrong to end that innocent human being's life. So whether that is, 5 days after fertilization by preventing implantation in the uterus, or whether that's 5 weeks right before brain waves have been detected, but right after the heartbeat's been detected, which is at 3 weeks, or whether that's at 5 months. In all of those cases, because the victim is human, the act of abortion is equally wrong. Between the first, second, and third trimester, all you have is a change in age, which is reflected in a different level of development, a different size, but the very identity of that individual is what remains the same over time.
Stephanie, the reason I want to do these separately is I want William to respond to that. Good
point.
Is that acceptable to you, William? Did that answer your question, or did you have a follow-up to it?
Yes, I understand the perspective. I think my follow-up question would be, in the case of 5 days after, the sexual act takes place, the sperm has not entered the uterus. The process is in the works, but in that case, would the life be generated?
So you're saying, I don't know if your timing is right. Maybe Stephanie knows more about the science than I do, but you're saying sperm and egg have not met yet. Is that right?
I don't really understand the intricacies of it, but if that's what she was saying, then
okay. So
sure, I can. Yeah, I can kind of explain that a little more. Actually, I think we need to distinguish when sex occurs from when conception occurs, because a couple can have sex and sperm be placed through the sexual act in the woman's body, but there be no egg that has yet been released by her ovaries. So in that case, you have sex, but you don't have conception or fertilization. But it's possible that a couple could have sex on a Monday, and there's no egg that has yet been released, but an egg is about to be released, which means the environment of the woman's body is getting ready for that, which means the sperm is able to live in her body for several days. So that on, let's say, Wednesday, she might release an egg, her ovaries would release that egg, and because the sperm has been able to survive in her body, it's, let's say, on the Wednesday where suddenly the sperm fertilizes the egg. That occurs in the fallopian tube. And it's at that moment where where you have conception or fertilization, and that's when life begins. So life doesn't necessarily begin at sex, but it does begin at fertilization, which may occur when sex happens or may occur a couple days later. But if we're talking about sperm actually meeting egg, then biologically and scientifically, you now have genetic offspring that are uniquely different from the parents but related to them. The way biology works is that child doesn't stay in the fallopian tube for 9 months. The baby moves through the fallopian tube and takes about 5 or so days to get into the uterus, and that's where the embryo implants. But life doesn't begin in the uterus. Biologically, it begins in the fallopian tube, and the movement into the uterus is really just a change of location because that's the ideal environment for long-term gestation, which would be the remaining, 9 months of the pregnancy. Does that help clarify things?
I'll one more follow-up question on this point. So, I'm not really sure how this works, but the morning after pill, is that preventing the life from being generated, or is that ending the life at such an early stage?
I have to say, William, I thought we were heading towards this because of the connection with the contraception. So is the morning after pill contraception or is it abortive?
Great question. And I would say that depends on whether the woman's body has released an egg or not. So if the egg has already been released, then the morning after pill cannot suppress ovulation because it has already occurred. And so one of the concerns is that if her own body physiologically has advanced to a certain point, then the concern is that taking the morning after pill could change the lining of the woman's uterus, making it inhospitable to implantation. And so that's where it could sometimes cause an abortion if it impacts her body after fertilization has occurred. But because a lot of women, sadly, haven't been taught how to track the physiology of their body and their own cycles, they won't often know if they've ovulated or not. You can know that, but a lot of women aren't taught that, or they're on the birth control pill, so they're masking that or suppressing that. So some methods of birth control, like the morning after pill, even the birth control pill, may cause an abortion or they may not. It depends on what's going on physiologically in the woman's body. So even with the birth control pill, a woman takes that, and if you read the medical literature on the pill, it's described as typically having 3 methods of action. Method 1 is to suppress ovulation so that if she has sex, the sperm in her body have no egg to get to. But that sometimes fails because no method of birth control is perfect. And so sometimes you have what's called breakthrough ovulation, where even though the woman is taking the pill each day, an egg is still released. And that means if she has sex, the sperm in her body might swim to the egg. So that's where the second mechanism of the pill kicks in, which is to try to change the cervical mucus in her body so that when sperm are swimming up through her reproductive organs to get to an egg, they have a harder time getting further up the reproductive tract because the cervical mucus makes it difficult for them to swim higher up. But that sometimes fails. And so the third mechanism of the birth control pill is to change a woman's uterine lining to make it thin rather than its normal thickness. And we know that this occurs because women who are on the pill will talk about how when they take the pill, they have lighter periods. And when they get off the pill, they have heavier periods. And so the change in flow is indicative of a thin or thick uterine lining. And so if you have a thinner uterine lining, what that means is if there's been breakthrough ovulation, if sperm have managed to swim past the cervical mucus and get up to the egg and fertilize it, that in a week's time, when that newly conceived human being tries to implant in the uterus, then that third mechanism might come into play, which would prevent the child from implanting in that thin lining rather than the normal thickness, and that baby could bleed out in what would be a very early abortion. Now, the woman probably would not visually detect that because the baby's so young it would just look like a period. But the reality is, even if she's not aware of it, this risk exists. And so by analogy, I would say, look, if you're working in a demolition of a building and you're about to blow it up and someone says, is the building clear or is someone still in it? if you don't know for sure that the building is empty, you have to err on the side of caution. You have to pause the plans to detonate, and you have to make sure the building is completely empty of any innocent party. And so we have to err on the side of caution in this particular case.
And William,
is that helpful?
I actually have to leave it there, Stephanie, because I have to go to a break. So I'm just going to have to assume that was helpful to William. I really appreciate the opportunity for that entire primer. Before we go to the break, I got to let you know the store-wide sale is ending this weekend. So if you want to get those prices 10 to 25% off, in some cases more than 25% off at shop.catholic.com, you got to go there before this weekend. Shop.catholic.com.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Stephanie Gray Connors, our guest. When she says about, you know she was a Canadian, but now she's a Floridian, and happy to take your calls. 888-318-7884. We're going to Omaha, Nebraska now. Spirit Catholic Radio. Samantha, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question or comment for Stephanie.
Hi. So I just want to start off by saying thank you for having me. But also, I guess my biggest issue when it comes to, I guess, just abortion in general and just looking at it in terms of political sense is it's why should the government have a say on what I can do with my body? And then 2, if, when people say, oh, we're so pro-life, well, okay, you're so pro-life, but what about all of the life that's already here, that's already alive, and living in foster homes, living in the system, and living in these awful homes or orphanages, and have nobody to care for and take care of them, and oftentimes grow up and have severe attachment issues. So what about those lives? So, and then we have, women who end up getting abortions. I don't feel like any woman wants to go and get an abortion. I feel like they are in an impossible situation and feel like they have no other choice. I don't think anyone's just I'm just going to go do it and, get a punch card and, but I think that for women, it's very hard for them to make that decision. And I think that when we look at that, well, why are they getting an abortion? Well, because we have so much going on in our society, poverty, the mistreatment of people of different races, racism, and other issues that can prevent families from even being able to have children. And those are societal issues that we need to fix as well. So if we're pro-life, as the Catholic Church says they are, then why isn't the Catholic Church doing a better job at making it so women will want to actually have babies and not feel like they need to get an abortion?
Great, Samantha. Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, thanks so much for all those questions, Samantha. Maybe we'll start with where you began. The first point about, you said, on other issues, we don't allow the government to tell people what to do with their bodies. So I would maybe ask you to consider that perspective. Is that true that the government never tells people what to do with their bodies? Does the government have laws against rape?
Oh, I'm sorry. I put Samantha on hold. It was my fault, Samantha. I apologize. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. No, I mean, yeah, I think when you look at rape and abortion, those are two very different things. As
Well,
someone
what I
who's
wanted
been
to-
raped, there's a big difference there.
Sorry, go ahead. What was that point? I didn't hear you.
I'm just saying, as someone who's been raped, I would say there is a big difference there between rape and abortion.
I mean, certainly I'm sorry for you having gone through that suffering. I have several friends that have experienced that, so I just extend my regrets and sympathy to you for having had faced that. So I realize bringing that up is wading into an area that's very sensitive for you. So as I maybe try to clarify my point, if that's too difficult for you, by all means, tell me if you just want me to move to the next question you asked. I think I'd be correct in... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was saying no, it's fine. You can talk about it, and thank you for your condolences.
Sure. So, I think it's safe to assume, and you'll probably agree with me here, that what you can agree with me on is that what makes rape so vile is that one person is using their body to harm another body. And so if we can agree with that, what that shows is when we have laws against rape and when we have consequences for people who break that law, we're acknowledging that the government is saying to the rapist, you can't do just whatever you want with your body. If what you're doing with your body is harming someone else's body, then we as a government are going to step in and we're going to stop you. So at least to that point, would you agree with me?
No, I would say that it's not really the person who's like the rapist. It's not, I don't think the issue with rape is, it's what they're choosing to do with their body. I think the issue with rape is the fact that they're taking advantage of someone else's body. I think that's where the core issue is, not with the choice that they're doing.
Yeah, so what they're doing with their body is they're taking advantage of someone else's body. Exactly. And that's what makes it wrong, is they don't have a right to harm, destroy, violate, and so forth someone else's body. And so the question then with abortion is a pregnant woman involving just her own body by her actions, or is another body being harmed? And very obviously, if she wasn't pregnant, she wouldn't be pursuing abortion, right? So clearly there's another body there. That's the body she wants removed. And so the question is, what about that child's right to his or her own body? And therefore, wouldn't it be wrong for the mother to destroy the child's body, to violate that child's body, to dismember that child's body? What would you say in response?
I guess to me, I don't see it as being a child at that point. I see it as being a cluster of cells. And to me, I don't officially see that as being life at that point. I would see it as just as growing of life. It's getting to the point of life, but it's not essentially life. I think that question there, it's hard to fully answer because it depends on, well, when do you think that life begins? And
so when would you say?
When the baby is able to survive with homeostasis, when the baby is able to live outside of the mother's womb. I know that the child is dependent on the mother for, feeding and shelter and all of those other things. But I mean, just living outside of the womb and being able to breathe on its own. That is when life begins.
So, I mean, at this point with advancing technology, that's generally around 24 weeks pregnancy. There have been some babies that have survived at 21, 22 weeks in incubators, but that's very rare. Usually viability is around 24 weeks. So does that mean then you're okay with abortion up to the 6th month of pregnancy?
Personally, I only think it should be within the first trimester. I think anything after 3 months, that's a little too far.
Okay, so just to kind of tease out then what you've said, there is what you're saying is certainly the more common view to only support abortion the first 3 months of pregnancy. But I would say it's inconsistent with another view you hold, that if your view is that you're not a life until you can survive outside the mother's body, then that means you're not a life until 6 months, which means one should reasonably and consistently support abortion to the 6-month mark. But if you only support abortion up to 3 months, then that is kind of revealing or showing that you must have a sense that even the inability inability to survive outside the womb doesn't take away the fact that at 3 months and 2 days, we're dealing with offspring of the mother. That offspring is young, immature, incapable of surviving outside the womb, but is still another individual. And so that also means even before 3 months, that offspring is young and immature, incapable of surviving outside the womb, but is still different from her body. And so when we try to wrestle with the question, when does life begin? What I often tell people is, setting aside religion, we actually need to go to science to tell us that. Religion can tell us how to treat human beings, but science tells us what is a human being. So that if you are, I don't know, walking in a grocery store and you see a slab of meat on the ground, and you're trying to decide, did the butcher drop a piece of meat off his tray, or did someone just commit homicide and leave a body part on the ground? We test the meat to determine, is this a piece of the cow or is this a human being body part? And so what we need to know is, when fertilization has occurred, are we dealing with a human being? And if the parents are human, then the answer is yes, we're dealing with another human. And then the question is, from the point of fertilization forward, what changes? And all that changes is the child changes her size, she gets bigger, she gets more developed, and she becomes increasingly independent. But since you were 5, you've increased your size, you've become more developed and increasingly independent. The question is, are human rights grounded in our size, how developed we are, how independent we are, or are human rights grounded in being a member of the human family?
Is that question for me?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say that makes a very valid point. But first, to just go back as to what you're saying, that I have inconsistencies, with what I'm saying, and I get where you're saying with that. The reason why I would not prefer after the 3-month mark is because that I just think after that point it can get tricky with complications and things like that, and more for the sake of the mother than anything. But going back to your other question, I'm sorry, can you rephrase that again? That last question.
Sure. So hopefully I can remember where I was going with it. From a human rights perspective, whether someone is religious or not, if we believe humans have human rights, then regardless of how big you are, how developed you are, or how independent you are, isn't all that matters is that you're a member of the human family and we automatically protect you. For example, take the children in foster care that you referenced. They might be technically unwanted insofar as their biological parents aren't caring for them. Maybe they're being abused by their foster parents. Maybe they're not being properly attended to by the government itself through social services. So one could say, well, they're unwanted, but and they're being mistreated. But wouldn't we say, well, whether they're wanted is irrelevant, whether they're mistreated is irrelevant. What's relevant is the child in the foster care system a human being? And if the child is a human being, then doesn't that mean we have a responsibility to protect and nurture that child, regardless of how other people feel about them, regardless of the environment they're in?
Right. Yeah. No, I see your question now. It comes back to, but yeah, no, that does bring up a really good point, and that does make me think, that's for sure. So I can't fully answer it without me diving a little bit deeper into my own thoughts.
Sure.
But just, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, Samantha, I'm actually just going to leave it there because I would like to get one more person on with Stephanie before we have to go, and I think I can, unless you disagree with me, Stephanie.
If you have to go on, I would just say, Samantha, I really appreciate your questions. I think they're really thoughtful. And the one thing I would suggest, because I didn't have time to elaborate too much on this foster care point, is the website sistersoflife.org. They're an order of nuns in New York that actually welcome pregnant women to live in their convent with them. And they journey with women through their pregnancies. And so I think one of the valid points you make is a need for the pro-life movement to not only object to abortion, but to really walk with women through the difficulties they're in beyond the pregnancy itself. And so sistersoflife.org do an amazing job of that. And they've really brought in my perspective on the things that we as a pro-life movement need to do. So I hope that's a helpful resource to you.
Okay, Samantha?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I really genuinely appreciate your call. And now we don't have time to go to another caller, so I'm not. But I do think Samantha's... when I hear the point made, Stephanie, that we can't be a society that says we're pro-life, but we we're not attentive to the needs of actual real women who get pregnant. We can do a better job of that.
Mm-hmm. We absolutely, the classic slogan is love them both, but it's really true that we have to really journey with people in crisis in order to give them an alternative to the abortion that seems so tempting in our world today.
Stephanie Gray, you can still be, people can find you at Love Unleashes Life on the internet?
Yeah, loveunleasheslife.com.
And congratulations again on the new young Connors coming into the world.
Thank you.
Stephanie Gray Connors has been our guest. Do check out her materials at Love Unleashes Life. And we got to go now. And we'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.